Hi friends, this is Caitlin, and today we are celebrating Pink and Main being a sponsor of an amazing and free card making class event called the Cardmaker Success Summit. This is a weekend-long event happening February 17th to the 20th, and there are going to be so many amazing classes and brands represented, you are not going to want to miss it. General attendance is free, and there's a link down in the description box below so you can reserve your spot now. But there's also a VIP option that has a huge discount before the event starts that gets you access to replays of all the classes, as well as extra bonus materials and an exclusive Facebook group with added content. As a member of the Pink and Main design team, I was so excited when I found out they were a sponsor for the event. So I really wanted to share it with you today, as well as this really fun and cheery Slimline card that I made with some of my favorite products from them. Check it out. I don't know about you, but I am personally so over winter, and so I really wanted to use the Sunny Greetings stamp set to make this really fun Slimline card. So I grabbed my Stitch Slimline dies just to make my smaller inner panel. I'll be using that larger piece of craft to make my card base. I grabbed the Big Hug dies to be my main sentiment, and then the Dottie stencil, which is absolutely adorable. And I'm going to get started doing my ink blending first. So I'm just adding some washi tape to the back of my panel, and if I was smart I would have done that in the air instead of taping it to my printer paper, but that's fine, we make it work. Because this is a 6x6 stencil, I am going to be shifting it halfway through, but these dots make it so easy to shift. It's literally no work at all. So I'm going in with Antique Linen Distress ink first on my mini ergonomic blending brush, and just adding a nice even light layer of that all over the card panel. And then we'll be going in to add a deeper color to the edges just to give it a little bit of a more vintage look before we shift the stencil up and repeat that process on the other end of the card. I've really been enjoying adding in some extra details and more layers to my cards lately, and so adding in these kind of ombre edged dots to this card panel really made me happy. I thought that the dots were nice because they're big enough to kind of stand up and be noticed next to the giant Big Hugs die, but not too distracting because I did it in neutral colors. So now I shifted my stencil down. I'm just lining up those dots so that they overlap right in the middle section, which is super easy because these are pretty uniform. And then, like I said, I just went back over the whole panel with my antique linen, and then took the vintage photo just around the outer corner. And I love the mini brush because it gives you just a little bit more control over where you're placing your colors. So it was easy to get that really cool antiqued edge where the edges are deeper and the center is a little bit lighter for more of like a vintagey feel. I also went in with the vintage photo ink on that blender without the stencil, just on the edges to darken up that area where the stitches are to help push that vintage feel as well. I just thought that it would kind of distress it a little more and give it just a little bit more pop against that craft cardstock when everything was done. I absolutely love how this turned out. I'm a huge fan of the Pink and Main stencils. My collection is growing pretty quickly and I'm a sucker for them, to be sure. So if you haven't tried out something like this, or haven't tried out using a 6x6 stencil on a slimline card, I definitely recommend shopping your stash and seeing what you have that you can extend across a longer panel, because it's way easier than you think. I die cut that shadow layer for the Hugs die set out of the same craft cardstock that we're going to be using for the main card panel, and then I stamped out my 2 floral images on some Copic Express It paper with alcohol-friendly black ink. Now I took another piece of that craft that I had left over from all of my trimming, and I am using some Versamark embossing ink, that clear sticky ink, and stamping in the Sending Sunshine tiny little sentiment that I'm going to add under my Big Hugs later. And I'm going in with cream embossing powder from Simon Says Stamp. I thought this would again tie in really well to that really pretty dot background that we created with a cream versus going with a super bright white. And then it was time to start Copic coloring these florals. Now, the first time I colored these up, I definitely went traditional and made them sunflowers, but for this one I really wanted to try something different. And so I decided to make them purple. So I don't know if there's really a purple flower that looks like this in real life, but I absolutely love it. I think that it's a really nice pop, and I love how the purple plays off of the cream and brown tones that we use to make the background, and then I'm going to also be adding to the center of these flowers. So I started out working in sections just to make sure that my ink didn't dry too much. And I'm going in with some V markers. As always, I'll have all of the colors listed in the description box below for you. I tried to keep all of the caps on screen all the time so you can see exactly where each marker was placed. But if they ever go too quickly for you, you can go ahead down in that description box and they'll all be listed out for you there as well. So I sped up the next couple of these flowers just because it was a little bit repetitive, but for all of them I went back in after the main coloring was done to add in an extra layer of my darkest color, which was that VO6, just to give it a little bit more definition. I feel like I could have done with a little bit of a dark color. Like my V6 wasn't as dark as I really wanted, but I don't have a ton of purple Copics yet. I'm working on that, but in the meantime, I just thought that this made a really pretty blend, and just to up that contrast, adding in that second layer really helped to create that pop and deepen those shadows in the center of the flower where those petals would be bending inwards, and I think that it really did the trick. So I also grabbed definitely different greens than I'm used to working with when it came to doing the foliage on these. I grabbed very like minty greens, and I absolutely love them. I have never played with these two markers combined together before, but I think that it's really fun and definitely different. I might not use them for every floral bouquet that I create in the future, but I definitely thought it was cool, and it was really fun to try out a different color combination for these. I really wanted to play out that sunflower kind of texture on the middle of these flowers using those tan and brown shades. So when I went in, I kind of kept like a scalloped squiggly shape while I was laying down the ink so that it really does bump up that kind of sunflower bumpy texture in the middle, and I think it just turned out really cute. I didn't want the center to be the focus. I really wanted that to be more on the petals, so I didn't get too intricate with adding extra dots. And then I die cut my Hugs sentiment, the inner part, out of that same Copic paper because in a little bit we're going to be going in with the same purple markers to color that in. I really love this Sunny Greetings stamp set because it also comes with little die cuts to cut out those sentiments. They're the perfect length. You can see that little sentiment strip is going to be absolutely straight and centered, and I love, you can see there on the bottom left how many different sizes you get with this set. They're amazing and super versatile that you can use them with so many other stamp sets. So now I'm scoring my craft card panel, which I cut to, I believe it was 7 inches by 8.5, so that my finished card panel is 3.5 by 8.5. And I'm just really pressing on that fold to make sure that this stays kind of flat. You'll see it stays popped up through most of my card making process, but that really doesn't bother me. This is definitely some heavy duty cardstock, but I wanted it to hold up well. So, you know, it's a give and a take. I laid a little bit of liquid glue on the back of that dotty panel, and now I'm just making sure it's nice and centered, which is why I use the liquid glue instead of a tape runner. It just gives you a little more wiggle room. Same for laying down these flowers. I wanted one on either side of that Hugs, and I wanted the Hugs to kind of stand up on top. So I laid those down on either side with that liquid glue first. Now it is time to color in my Hugs sentiment. And when this was done, to me it kind of almost has a watercolor finish, which I think for this style of card is really beautiful. I think that if I was going to do this again and I didn't want a watercolor feel to it, I would have either colored my paper section completely first and then die cut out my letters, or maybe just even going in with a second or third layer of ink would have helped it to look a little bit more solid. You could always ink blend if you have a distress ink or any kind of ink that you like to blend with that's close enough in that color range. You could ink blend that straight onto a piece of paper and then die cut it out as well. I just really wanted them to be an exact match to the flowers. So again, I think that the watercolor finish looks really cool. I'm sure there are ways around it, but definitely give it a try. I glued down the inner part to my shadow, and then I wanted to give this a little bit of dimension without adding any foam. So I cut a second layer of that shadow out and just glued it right onto the back. So it feels almost more like a chipboard kind of width. And I like the weight that it gives to the piece. So I laid in the hugs where I thought it would go and lined up my Sending Sunshine little sentiment at the bottom right above those stitch lines and glued that down. Then I adhered my main sentiment right in the middle so that a little bit hung over each of the flowers on the side just to kind of center and frame everything up. So on the inside of my card, I added this nice long sentiment from that same stamp set that says, "We'll get through this together." And I also went in with a little bit of that vintage photo ink and stamped in one of the other sunflower or flowers that I didn't use on the front, just to kind of tie everything together. I'm so sorry that it kind of got cut off screen. I will promise I will try to do better in the future about making sure that all of my camera angles are right and that I'm lined up on my desk. So I just really have been trying to add more detail and sentiments to the inside of my card just to help hold myself accountable, so I'm more likely to send them. Then I grabbed my Essential Pearls little set and I took these off-white pearls and I'm going to add 3 to each kind of floral arrangement. I thought this just tied everything in really nicely with the circles on the background and then the pearls circles on the front. I didn't want anything too sparkly or distracting, and I thought that the off-white just kind of was a nice little hint of glitz without going too much over the top. Thank you so much for coming to hang out with me today. I hope you're feeling super inspired. Make sure you check out the Cardmaker Success Summit that I have linked down in that description box below. And while you're here, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the card inspiration that I have coming your way. I hope that you have an absolutely amazing weekend and next week. And as always, happy crafting.